Communicate, from the Latin communicare, to share or to make common. A master of communication, Martin Luther was not the first theologian to emphasize the importance of understanding Scripture over attendance at Mass, but he was the first to utilize the multimedia revolution taking place around him to get this message across. By preaching in the local vernacular, creating illustrated pamphlets using the new printing press, and writing scripture-based hymns, Luther transformed the Christian church from a hierarchical institution marked by strict guidelines and rules to a more personal and scripture-based faith, reforming and changing Christianity forever. Martin Luther was born in 1483 in Mansfeld, Germany. Not much is known of Luther's childhood, but what is known is that he was an academic from a young age. So in 1505, he entered at the University of Erfurt to study law. He soon decided that law wasn't for him and decided to become an Augustinian monk, devoting himself to God. He returned to his studies in 1507, majoring in theology and finishing his doctorate in a mere 5.5 years. Luther continued living his vocation as a monk, but in 1508 he got his first big break when he was asked to give a lecture on moral philosophy at the University of Wittenberg. He continued lecturing on and off until 1511 when he was asked to join the university staff as a professor of biblical studies. This began his journey to Reformation. Martin Luther's lectures were the first way he communicated his ideas about the importance of cultivating a personal understanding of the Bible. He was so well-spoken that students asked to be in his classes, and some even began scribing the entirety of his lectures to make sure they were preserved. Eventually, these works were collected and published. Because of their relevance, they continue to be studied today. In order to better understand what he was teaching, Luther taught himself Latin, Greek, and Hebrew so he could read all versions of the Bible for himself, which he later encouraged all members of the church to do as well. As a result, he shifted his focus to encouraging others to study the Bible and Scripture itself, as opposed to merely listening to the Mass and following the instruction of the clergy. This idea upended the religious traditions of the time and became too controversial for his fellow theologians. The philosophical conflict eventually caught the attention of Pope Leo X. Recognizing an opportunity, Martin Luther took advantage of the invention of the printing press, which had revolutionized the way humans consume media. In the mid-1400s, Johann Gutenberg began making his first prototypes of the printing press. He released his first working press in 1450, rocking the world of print media. A few decades later, with his publications, Martin Luther helped to make Gutenberg's invention globally known. In 1517, Luther spoke out for the first time against indulgences, which were one of the main ways the Catholic Church collected money. Soon afterward, Martin Luther created an iconic moment in history and in the history of communication by nailing his 95 Theses to the door of the Catholic Church in Wittenberg. The document covered many topics, including indulgences, marriage in the church, and salvation itself. He was the first to claim that the wrongdoing of indulgences was more than mismanagement. By doing so, he called out the illegitimacy of the entire system. The list was written in German, a deliberate insult to the Latin-speaking church officials, as well as a move that enabled all citizens to read his thoughts. Publishers from all over swooped in and reprinted thousands of copies of the 95 Theses in German, Latin, Greek, and Italian. If a person could go viral in the 1500s, Martin Luther did, and thus he started his journey to becoming the first mass media mogul. Immediately after posting his 95 Theses, there was pushback from church leaders. In the rebuttal against Luther's sermon on indulgences and grace, Johann Tetzel, Grand Commissioner of Indulgences in Germany, refuted Luther's claims and defended the necessity of granting, or rather selling, indulgences in order for Christians to achieve salvation. But this was just the first of much negative feedback that Luther would receive from church leaders in his lifetime. Several pamphlets were published objecting to Luther's teachings, including the Bull in Wittenberg, in which theologian Jerome Emsar referred to Luther as a raging bull and stated that his teaching resembles the gospel as much as an ass resembles a lion, and also in Response Against Luther's Mad Hunt, in which Johann Meyer von Eck, another prominent theologian, argued that Luther is just a heretic undermining the church. As Luther learned the power that printed words held, he began releasing more and more printed works, accompanied by detailed woodcuttings. All of these were printed in German, though most of the contemporary literature was printed in Latin. The use of the local language along with the use of art caused the readership of Luther's pamphlets to go through the roof. In addition, the majority of people who were illiterate could see the images and understand the message of Christianity. This early version of social media helped Martin Luther to expand his following by giving people access to his ideas, whether or not they could read, which had never been done before. As months continued, Luther kept writing. He released several pamphlets a month in addition to giving lectures and speeches in class and in public, teaching that Christianity should be about you understanding the Bible, you knowing God's grace, instead of you participating in a service even though it's held in a language that you don't understand, thus making Christianity more personal. Luther used the new mass media so much that in 1519 he became Europe's most published author with more than 45 original works. As he continued to draw more and more followers, he captured more and more attention from the church. From 1519 to 1521, there were many conversations, private letters, and public pamphlets between Luther and the Pope. Neither was willing to change his opinions, and neither was willing to back down. So on January 3, 1521, Martin Luther was officially excommunicated from the church. His excommunication was followed by numerous violent threats, so he faked his own kidnapping to stay safe. During the year he was hidden away at Wartburg Castle in Eisenach, Germany, Martin Luther translated the entire Bible from Latin to German to give access to all church members who were able to read. He did this in hopes that people would read the Bible and learn to understand and appreciate Scripture. His Bible, dubbed the Luther Bible, was printed and sold throughout Germany. Once he left Wartburg, Luther returned to his home in Wittenberg and set out to create what he called a theological revolution, preaching the key ideas of education, grace, access, and social reform. In order to continue the media storm he had already started, he enlisted the help of musicians and poets to write scripture-based hymns. This music became very popular, along with the hymns he wrote himself, like A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. Townspeople and musicians would gather in groups and sing these songs publicly. Whether people realized it or not, this pop music of the time was really scripture, giving them access to the Bible in a way they hadn't experienced before. Martin Luther continued promoting controversial ideas when he married his wife, Katharina von Bora, in 1525. Their wedding became known as the first real German Protestant church service. Marriage of the avowed religious flew in the face of the Catholic tradition that priests need to stay celibate in order to effectively fulfill their ministry. Contrary to church practice, Luther's marriage did not hinder him, and in 1529 he published the book The Large Catechism, which was an easy-to-read book of Christian theology he hoped would help ordinary people to understand themselves and their faith. The main idea was to focus on what God has done for you, not what you need to do for God. He then began publishing short essays and even two-sentence quotes to get people thinking. These quotes and essays were later collected and turned into his now famous Table Talks. The following year, he and a close friend, Philip Melanchthon, wrote the Augsburg Confession, a collection of 28 articles that became one of the most important documents of the Protestant Reformation. It was written to avoid misinterpretation of Luther's work and for the Catholic Church to begin to understand Lutheran theology. The men presented the confession to Emperor Charles V at the Diet of Augsburg. However, their ideas and arguments were rejected. In fact, the writings were even banned, and Luther was declared a heretic and an enemy of the state. But this document would eventually become the cornerstone of the Lutheran faith. Luther worked and taught until his death in 1546, leaving the world as the most influential founder of the Reformation movement. Today, Lutheranism is practiced worldwide. His work has been translated into at least 73 languages, and the Reformation is taught in every history class. Luther is at the center of the Lutheran faith, and his philosophy is found in parts of other denominations as well. His groundbreaking idea of faith for you, based on Scripture alone, is common practice now, which would have been unimaginable at the time. Luther changed what it meant to be a Christian by taking advantage of the budding media revolution. His media blitz gave the public access to the Bible in ways that they had never done before, quite literally meeting people where they were, using speech, art, and song to help them understand and communicate their own personal faith.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.